Every club. Every day. The Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to Beyond the Pitch, a daily women's football podcast brought to you by the Global Sports Podcast Network. I'm Catherine, and today I'm going to be talking all about international football. Before I get to that, how are you guys? It's been a while. I took some time away from the podcast because I was really busy at my day job and I had my driving test, which I very nearly passed. So it's been a while. Nice to see you all. So what I'm going to be talking about today is I have some questions. What do the Nations League match day one results tell us about the growth of the women's game? Are we becoming obsessed with youth and bringing young players in? Lastly, I'll talk about upcoming games, including Scotland hosting the Netherlands and the big one, England's chance for revenge against Spain at Wembley on Wednesday. I will be there. Will you? So, to review some of the results, Netherlands and Germany drew 2-2. Austria beat Scotland 1-0. Portugal and England drew 1-1. Spain beat Belgium 3-2. Italy beat Wales 2-0. France beat Norway 1-0. Switzerland and Iceland had a goalless draw. Poland beat Northern Ireland 2-0. And the Republic of Ireland got their first win of the Carla Ward era, beating Turkey 1-0. So what occurred to me about all these results is that they're all very close. In previous iterations of European competitions, it would not be uncommon to see scorelines of 4 or 5-0, even 6-7-8-0. The gulf between countries was huge and the games were not competitive. And that was the reason why, if you remember, the Nations League was actually brought in the first place, to give teams competitive games. This round, nobody won by more than 2 goals. There were 3 draws, some very close games, Spain and Belgium, France and Norway in particular. In both of those games, you would have expected a strong win for Spain and a strong win for France. And even though they both did get those wins, it was a much closer scoreline than you would have expected. So what does that tell us about where the women's game is now? To me, it feels like the world has changed. You can't go into any game 100% convinced of a strong win for anybody. It also suggests that no one team is that dominant, which is really exciting ahead of a summer where we have the European Championships. For example, many would say Spain have to be favourites for the Euros. Yet their form has been quite inconsistent of late. Of course, they have had other things to focus on, for example, the court case, which, I don't want to get into a rant, so I won't rant. They were 2-0 down to Belgium for most of this game, and for the most part, Belgium kind of knew how to play against them. They got that right. And I think one big kind of symptom of this growth is that there's been huge strides in how teams defend. There have been much more variety in terms of tactics and shapes on offer. Well, I think it used to be very much either fluid attacking football versus a low block and kind of strike on the counter. Now teams and coaches are much more able to adapt during the game and between games, utilising different shapes and pushing the traditional top teams back into less of a high line. We saw this with Portugal. They struggled during the first half because England had one of their best performances in quite a while. After half-time, however, Portugal adapted. They changed shape to press England more. And we've seen this before with England. When they get pressed, when they get put under pressure, they can become quite sloppy. And I think we saw that again in the second half, and that allowed Portugal to get back into the game. That adaptability, I don't think we would have seen that a few years ago. And I think it shows how technically the game has grown and tactically the game has grown as well. I think it's really important that as fans, we keep these developments in mind and keep an eye on the bigger picture. England struggling for 45 minutes against Portugal, Spain struggling for most of a game against Belgium, Germany and the Netherlands cancelling each other out. I think this is all good for the women's game as it makes the matches more exciting, even if it doesn't feel that way for the teams like England, who are getting used to no longer having the dominance that they once had. So why is all of this happening? I have some theories. So I think it's to do with how globalized football has become, much like the men's game. Many of the best players from teams across Europe travel to the leagues they think are the strongest because they want to develop their game even further. For example, Manchester City in the WSL recently fielded a team that didn't have an English player in the starting 11. We've seen this in the men's game for quite a while, but it's only beginning to become apparent in the women's game. And I think when you think about that City starting 11, you had players representing countries from the Netherlands to Japan, and it's really exciting. It allows players to learn from each other, and it also brings kind of the best talents to one place where they can challenge each other, push each other, and learn from each other. Whilst players come to the WSL because of the standards, others go elsewhere because they want to work out of the spotlight, and I think that's really important as well. Especially in England, we like putting our players under the spotlight. We like putting our players and managers under lots of pressure. For example, Georgia Stanway has been in incredible form since moving to Bayern Munich. And I think she credits a lot of her form on the international stage with that move to Bayern, which allowed her to kind of work on her football without having the pressure of being in the spotlight in England. Mary Earps recently said that her move to PSG was in part because champions are born when nobody is watching, that she wanted to escape the noise and kind of the craziness around women's football in England, and perhaps get away from some of that pressure and some of that focus, that drive that is always on you when you're in England, and do her job quietly. So I think this raises some interesting questions for the future of England developing its players. So, of course, if you're starting to have starting 11s in the top teams that don't include English players, where are they going to play and where are they going to get that space to learn? However, I think that means the impetus is on other leagues to step up and create a competition that is attractive to foreign talents. I don't think the WSL is the most competitive league in Europe. I've said that before. I think it's the Frauenbundesliga. And you do see quite a few foreign players in the Frauenbundesliga. I think other leagues, perhaps ones that are known as training leagues like the Eredivisie in the Netherlands, the potential is there if the investment is realised. You can see that with Germany and with the WSL, to bring foreign players in, which will make the league stronger, make the leagues more attractive, make the games more competitive, but also allow the players to grow, which will feed back into their international team performances. Let's realise that investment for the good of the game. So for my second topic of today, I wanted to talk about the obsession we seem to have with young players. So as a Manchester United fan, how I think about young players is influenced strongly by two things: the Busby Babes and the Munich air disaster in '58, and the class of '92, who proved that you can win things with kids. So for those who don't know, the Busby Babes were a group of Manchester United footballers who had been through the United youth teams, reaching the first team under the management of Sir Matt Busby. With an average age of 22 in the 57 to 58 season, they were expected to dominate Europe due to their incredible performances. However, in 1958, they were taking off from Munich airport after playing a European Championship game when their plane crashed in heavy snow, and 8 of the team's players died as a result, whilst others had long-term injuries. Their loss cast a shadow over Manchester United that remains to this day, and was part of the beginning of a long tradition wherein youth players would play integral roles and become the forefront of the club's performances. Decades later, the class of '92 were brought into the first team under Sir Alex Ferguson. Players like the Neville brothers, Nicky Butt, Paul Scholes, Ryan Giggs. You will know some of these names. Pundits suggested that the young team would never win a thing. However, they eventually won the treble in 1999, the Champions League, the Premier League, and the FA Cup. That was an achievement that has only been repeated once, and it was repeated once by Manchester City, which we will not talk about. There is a deep desire to see stories like this repeated, young players being the focal point of teams, leading to incredible victories. It's a really inspiring story. And I think we've become obsessed with the notion of young players being dominant in women's football, especially in Europe. So the most common criticism that I hear of England manager Sarina Wiegman is that she does not give youth a chance and prefers her old guard. Now, interestingly, similar accusations are always put on the Netherlands head coach, Andries Jonker, and there are rumours because he is leaving his post at the end of this year's Euros, and some rumours in the Netherlands have suggested that some of the players are not happy with his approach, where he pretty much, a similar thing, that he sticks with his old favourites and isn't very progressive in terms of giving youth a chance. In both of these cases, I don't actually think that's true. I know less about the Netherlands setup, so I won't talk about that as much. But I really don't think it's true in England. I think the Switzerland game proves that. Back in December, we had a game where we made 10 changes to the game before that included players like Aggie Beever-Jones, Grace Clinton, Maya Letizier. All these players are getting chances. And even the game against the USA, England actually had a lower average age for the starting 11 than the US did. The US had an average age of like 28 or something, and England's was 26. So I don't believe that's true. However, it's a little bit besides the point. The point that I'm trying to make is that a lot of fans seem to believe in the power of young game changers to come in and pull off something incredible. And I'm not saying that I don't think that will happen. I mean, you just look at Grace Clinton and her performances at both United and England. You look at Maya Letizier, who has been incredible in defence for Manchester United this season as captain. However, I just want to say that I do think there's a danger in this as well. When we constantly try and push young players forward, international football, particularly in England, where we're coming from a period of unprecedented success, winning the Euros, there's a lot of noise around this England team. It's a pressure cooker, and at the senior level is unlike anything players will have experienced before. We have a strong pathway at England which helps bring some of that experience to younger players, but the sheer volume and level of noise around this England senior team is not something that is seen throughout the pathway. Throughout the pathway, you don't get stadiums full of 38,000 fans shouting and screaming. You don't get the amount of noise from the media, the amount of opinions from pundits, fans alike. And I think that there's a lot more freedom to kind of get that exposure to high-level competitive football, international high-level competitive football, but without all of the noise, or without most of the noise that accompanies it. And I think it really could be a danger that if we expose young players to this too quickly, that it could be too much pressure and it could cause a lot of damage to them, not just their careers, but also just cause a lot of kind of distress and upset. And just think of when David Beckham was sent off for England in the World Cup. I think it was against Argentina, and received death threats and everything. And he was in his very early 20s at the time. And I think sometimes with the younger players, of course, they sometimes lack that kind of discipline to, restrain themselves and can be a bit more impulsive. And I just think there is a danger to overly focusing on youth. I think in England, we most see this with Aggie Beever-Jones. She plays for Chelsea. She is a regular super sub for Chelsea, coming on, scoring goals. And a lot of people have been calling for her to be starting games for England, particularly pundits. I think Ian Wright suggested that she should have started against the US. Was it Germany or the USA? And again, I think she's brilliant. This is not an attack on any young players, by the way. I think they're absolutely brilliant. I'm just wary of kind of protecting them from the big world and saying that, they need to be brought in slowly. I think there needs to be kind of introduced to this crazy world of fans and media and all this attention and focus and expectations. And I don't think starting a 21-year-old at Wembley in front of, 80,000 fans against Germany would have been a very smart idea when the person had never played more than 5 minutes of football for England before. So I just think we need to be a bit more measured about it. And I do think people kind of go over the top in how they think of the youth in the England team. I mean, in the Lionesses at the moment, we have quite a lot of young talents. We have Grace Clinton, as I mentioned, Maya Letitia, as I've mentioned, Jess Park, Jess Naz, Aggie Beaver-Jones, even Hannah Hampton's really young. People forget that Ella Toone and Alessia Russo are both in their mid-20s. They're not exactly old. Even captain Leah Williamson is only 27. I think, is she 27 or 28? Either way, it's not an old team, which I think people also forget. But it's quite interesting that the Netherlands head coach has had similar kind of complaints against him. Yeah, and I think that just shows that people I think people are always looking for the next best thing rather than kind of also looking at, well, what are the strengths of what we've actually got. And I also think you need to make sure that you have those leaders in the team that can kind of guide those brilliant younger players as they're coming through. Like with the class of 92 at Manchester United, you had people like Roy Keane, you had Cantona there who would kind of, Peter Schmeichel, who would keep the youngsters in line and kind of guide them and be a presence on the pitch. And I think without those strong kind of older, more mature leaders, would the youngsters have hit the heights? But yeah, it's interesting with England because I think people seem to think that there's like a World Cup winning under 21 set of players out there. And while I think there are very talented players in the EU setup, I think it's an incredible amount of pressure to try and put on them to say, come in and change the game against Germany at Wembley or the US at Wembley on this stage. So yeah, those are definitely my thoughts about that. Here at the Global Sports Podcast Network, we spent a lot of time selecting our delivery platform. Zencastr came out the clear winner, with 4K video recording from your phone and AI editing that automatically removes all those ums and ahs. It's super easy to start a podcast that sounds great and is delivered efficiently. So if you're ready to tell your story, check out the link in the show description to learn more about Zencastr. Okay, so looking ahead, our last topic for today is the Nations League Match Day 2 fixtures. So let's start off with Scotland versus the Netherlands. Scotland are still without a permanent head coach, which, I mean, I understand they want to take their time, and I guess they can because they don't have a major tournament this summer. However, surely for the good of kind of the team development and the squad development, they would want to get someone in quickly. I have a slight theory. Well, I would quite like it if the Netherlands head coach who is leaving at the end of the Euros gets the Scotland job. That is quite a long time to wait. I don't know what Scotland's plans are for the summer since they don't have the Euros. And ideally, I think it would be a good thing for the new manager to be in place before the summer so that any friendlies that are planned can be used to kind of suss out the team. However, that might be something that they look at. So the Netherlands had a strong performance against Germany, particularly in that first half again. They're coming off that 2-2 draw. That was quite high intensity. They'll be looking for a game that's a bit calmer for sure. Danielle van der Donk withdrew due to injury that she picked up in the Germany game. We might well see a bit more rotation for the Netherlands this time around. I would like to see Lise Kopp get a game, the Spurs goalkeeper. I think her Spurs performances kind of do warrant her getting a shout out, particularly for the national team. Scotland will be missing Erin Cuthbert. She has a bruised rib, so she's back home in Chelsea. Scotland were improved in their performance against Austria, losing 1-0. They're really struggling to score and kind of be creative, and missing Erin Cuthbert does not help with that. So we'll see. I don't think it's going to be the Netherlands steamrolling Scotland. I hope not. I really don't want to see that. I could see it being quite close. I would love to see Scotland score. So maybe a 3-1, 2-1, something like that. That would be my prediction. And then we have the big one. On Wednesday, England versus Spain at Wembley. I'll be there. And yeah, I can't wait for it. I think a lot of people in England, English people, we like to catastrophize and we like to focus on the negative. And so most people that I've seen talking about this online have just said, oh, Spain are going to win 6-0. Spain are going to completely, smash us. And my response is just, people said that as well about the US. People said that about the US game in December and we kept a clean sheet. So you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. Spain have been inconsistent as well. Obviously, they've had their issues off the pitch, which I think, that inevitably impacts the team, impacts the players in the squad. I think their main danger will be the Arsenal player Caldente. She knows this England defence particularly well. Leah Williamson, obviously, at Arsenal. Yeah, she knows this defence very well. She scores, some absolute bangers from distance. I think she's a real danger. Spain will be missing a couple of players. England will be missing a couple of players, so it's not full strength against full strength. And then there's the question, what do we want to see from England after that Portugal draw? I would like to see a more consistent 90 minutes. So the effort that we put in the first half against Portugal, I thought we played really, really well. I would like to see that kind of intensity be more consistent. However, I appreciate that the reason that dropped off wasn't necessarily because England were less energetic, but it was because Portugal changed their shape and we struggled to adapt to it. So maybe a bit more kind of adaptability and a bit more impetus to change things. I will always defend Serena, but I would like to see some substitutes come on a little bit earlier, particularly if we're kind of struggling at a point. However, that is a thing with quite a few managers. It's not just her. I would like us to be a bit more clinical. So Spain do have defensive frailties. They conceded 2 to Belgium. It might be a game of just hoping to score more than they do. It might be a 5-3 or a 4-3 like the Germany game was. We can score against this Spain team, so I hope we do. I want us to be more clinical. I think the midfield without Georgia Stanway worked for large parts of the game against Portugal. The big question for me would be whether we start Grace Clinton again. I was impressed with her during the first half against Portugal. I think she was really good. She was very physical. She was very good on the ball. She was working hard off the ball. She was getting back. Yeah, I was really impressed with that. And also, I think she was linking up with Kira Walsh pretty well. I think during the second half, particularly when Portugal changed their shape, she kind of struggled a bit more and became a bit wobblier. And again, I think Grace Clinton is amazing. She's 21. Yeah, I think she's fantastic. So this is by no means an attack on Grace Clinton. I just think maybe with more experience, she will learn to adapt more quickly to the changes that are going on around her, like we saw against Portugal, and then kind of being a bit sloppy in possession. We saw that with other members of the team as well. And I think it's understandable as well because she isn't playing in a position she's kind of most often played in for Manchester United. She's kind of being used as a Georgia Stanway replacement, which of course is needed. But yeah, that's an interesting one for me, whether we will see the same kind of makeup of the midfield with Grace Clinton, Jess Park and Kira Walsh. Jess Park is also a question. I wouldn't mind seeing against Spain Jess Naz. I know that's going to be a controversial comment, but Jess Naz has a lot of speed. She's very pacey down the left. She's also very keen to defend, to get back and defend. So I wouldn't be surprised if we start with Jess Naz and everyone goes nuts and says, what is Serena doing? But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And it worked against the USA. So yeah. And overall, I mean, the Nations League obviously is important. You want to win every game. But everything at the moment, I think we need to remember the big picture. The big picture is the summer. And for this team, I think we have seen signs of progress without key players in Lauren Hemp and Georgia Stanway and Alex Greenwood against Portugal. That first half was good. We need to build on that. We need to become more consistent. And this is all gearing towards the summer. And so I want to think of this team and then kind of think of it with Hemp and Stanway and Greenwood back in and kind of think of what it will be like then. And hopefully, I mean, I think it's possible we'll see Lauren Hemp back in for April, which would be amazing. I definitely think that's possible. Maybe Greenwood. I think Manchester City have said that Greenwood's slightly behind Hemp in terms of progress. Georgia Stanway, I think, will be a bit later. However, I've seen her with the Bayern team kind of bouncing around on crutches. So hopefully she won't be too far behind. Just do some relaxing in the tattoo studio, and then I'm sure she'll be right as rain come the Euros. Well, that's all I have time for today. So thank you for joining me. We look forward to welcoming you to the next episode of Beyond the Pitch. And yeah, we'll see you soon.